Sometimes even good people can make a mistake. And when it happens, it's one of the most intense and emotional experiences of your life. It could be a DUI, or maybe you were in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time. Or perhaps you just did something stupid at the spur of the moment without even thinking, and now you're in trouble with the law. Well, you need experienced legal help right away so you don't become a victim of the criminal justice system. Even good people can make a mistake, and if you, a friend, or loved one has been accused of a crime, don't make another mistake by hiring the wrong attorney for the kind of help you need. You need to visit toddjohnslaw.com. That's toddjohnslaw.com, and then call Attorney Todd Johns today. Attorney Todd Johns has decades of experience helping good people like you who have made mistakes or bad decisions and will stand by you every step of the way. toddjohnslaw.com.
All right, hello and welcome to That's Enough Out of You. I am your host, Bill Rader, and joining me is my co-host, Sean Kane. Sean, how you doing today?
Billy Braids, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing pretty good indeed. We're getting pretty close to a big number with our YouTube subscribers. So we need you to keep subscribing if you're listening and you're not subscribed. If you're listening and you're not subscribed, please do so right away. All you have to do is click on that subscribe button, the notification bell, and you'll get notified every time new shows come out. And we've been doing some bonus shows lately, Sean. So different things are happening. So make sure you subscribe. Make sure you go to our Patreon. We've got a lot of good things happening over on our Patreon. Our weekly show over there, the Speakeasy, is really doing pretty well. So we want to make sure we get the word out. Everybody knows about our Patreon page, so make sure we do that. And we have a great guest today, our returning guest. She's been with us a number of times. She is the author of America's Last President: What We Lost When We Lost John F. Kennedy, and Michael Jackson, the man. Is it the man in the mirror? Right, that's the
man, the music, the controversy.
I'm sorry. I only got part of the title came up for me. Monika Wiesak joins us again. Monika, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me back on. It'll be fun to chat today.
Yeah, excited to have you back. All right, Sean, let's get going. I know we got a lot to talk about with Monika. Where do you want to start?
Well, you know what, Monika, let's start with your great article that you had on Jim DiEugenio's website, Kennedy's and King, where you talked about, how JFK tried to prevent, these lesser of evil elections and try to, minimize the big money that's in politics today. So let's start at the beginning of that article because it's a fantastic article. We'll post a link to that so people could read it.
Okay, yeah. So it's something I actually missed in my book, or I missed the details of it. So I did talk a little bit in my book about, how he was trying to register the American Zionist Council as a foreign agent. And in that section of my book, I talked a little bit about some general statements he had made about his concerns about money influencing politics and money influencing campaigns. But later on, when I was doing some research, I realized that it wasn't just something he raised conversationally in press conferences, but it's something he actually tried to pursue. So in the fall of 1961, he actually set up a commission to study how to finance campaigns and what's the most effective way to finance campaigns to get as broad a number of contributors as possible, because his concern was that traditionally campaigns were financed by a small volume of large donors.
Right.
And then that put pressure on the politicians that were elected to serve that handful of donors that finance their campaigns. And he said, this is not good for ethical standards in our government. We need everyone to finance campaigns. Everyone in America should play a role in financing campaigns and not just a few large donors. So this commission went away for about 6 months and did a bunch of research on, well, what's the most effective way to do that? What's the best way to do that? What's the most practical way to do that we can, get through Congress or whatnot? And they basically came back in the spring of 62, and then JFK submitted some proposals to Congress as to how they could best achieve this goal. And some of the options he suggested to them is to do like a tax credit, a 50% tax credit. Up that point, it was up to $10 annually, which would be about $100 today. So if you
Right.
contributed $200 to a campaign, you'd get a $100 tax credit return on your campaign. Or another option gave them is to make campaign contributions tax deductible. That was another proposal he suggested. A third option he gave them is to have the government match contributions. So instead of giving a tax credit, let's say you go give a $10 donation to your candidate, the government will then donate $10 to the candidate that you donated to. So basically, the government will match your donations. And they recommended against putting limits on contributions because that's another thing that was talked about as well. Can we put limits on how much someone can contribute to try to reduce these large donors? And the commission came back to him and said, that's not really practical for a couple of reasons. One, it doesn't solve the problem of having everyone donate. That doesn't encourage small donors. And number two, they felt the Supreme Court would come back at some point and strike it down as unconstitutional because the free speech laws in America, there's nothing, if you try to stop someone from promoting a candidate, you're infringing on their free speech rights. Like if I want to go and promote Kamala or Trump or whoever, I should have that as a free speech citizen. I should have the right to go and promote them as much as I want. And so the commission told him, it's not a good idea to go down that path because you're just going to run into issues with the Supreme Court.
Sure.
So Kennedy proposed this in spring of 62. He went back to Congress in the spring of 63 and proposed this again. Obviously, he died later in 63 and he never got this through. And what happened instead is in 1971, we got the Federal Election Campaign Act, and they did exactly what the commission suggested they shouldn't do. They put in contribution limits, but what they didn't do is they didn't give any incentive to increase the number of donors, to have a wider donor base. And so they basically did the exact opposite of what JFK was suggesting. And then the parts of that law over the years have been struck down as unconstitutional. We had that Citizens United about 10 years ago, I think it was. And again, it was struck down as unconstitutional because of free speech and saying, if I want to go and promote candidate. Oh, the other thing that the commission said is by doing this, you're going to increase the number of PACs. Because there are super PACs and PACs.
Sure.
And he said, all this is going to do is you're going to have a bunch of more political action committees. You're going to have super PACs. And you're going to have these other organizations and groups donating to campaigns. And that's exactly what happened when they did that 1971 Federal Election Campaign Act, which did try to create limits. All that did is that vastly increased the number of PACs, because every PAC has its own limit. Super PACs have no limits. Super PACs can't donate directly to a campaign. They can just promote that campaign. They're not officially part of the campaign. Whereas PACs donate directly to campaign, and they do have a limit, but there's no limit on the number of PACs that can be created. So in essence, there's still no limit, which is exactly what the commission told JFK was going to happen, that there's just no way to practically enforce these limits. There's no way to constitutionally enforce these limits. And so what you need to do is you need to do tax credits, you need to do matches on contributions, ways to get smaller donors. And the best thing you can do about big donors is disclosure. So JFK said, we need to find some way to really disclose where money is going in campaigns, who's contributing to these campaigns, how much are they contributing? And that's probably the best way to, we can't stop large donors, but what we can do is we can disclose them, we can create transparency, and we can have a bunch of small donors to balance them out. And that's what he was trying to accomplish. And I think had he stayed president till 1968, I think he definitely would have gotten those laws through. And if he had, we might be looking at a completely different political landscape today, because we wouldn't have all these politicians so subservient to all these wealthy donations like we do today. So I would say our entire base of elected politicians over these last 60 years might have been quite different than what we've seen. So I was kind of upset at myself for missing that in my book because, my subtitle is What the World Lost When It Lost John F. Kennedy. And think that's a pretty big loss, and a very long-term loss. So,
Well, it's amazing, the stuff that Kennedy did, it really is amazing. And this is just another thing. I mean, it's easy to miss a lot of these things because there's so many things that he did. And this again has to do with Kennedy believing the president should serve the people and not industry. And
yes,
this is what he
exactly.
really seen. This was his vision. And then you talked about, you know, if Kennedy lived and then you had 2 terms of JFK, you may have had Bobby after that. So you may have 2 terms of Bobby and everything, the whole landscape would have been different.
Yeah, and JFK actually also said, so he had voted, I think in 51 or whenever it was, to get rid of the or to impose the 2-term limit. But then in 1959, when he was interviewed about it, he said he regretted that vote. That was the wrong vote, that Americans should be able to reelect a president as long as they want him. And he said he would have approved a repeal of that. So you don't know. He might have even ended up serving more than 2 terms potentially.
Wow.
We just don't know what would have happened if he'd survived. And I think it also shows, the fact that I had missed this in my book, I think it shows how active of a president he was and just how many things he was doing that nobody knows about. People talk about Vietnam and Cuba, but he was doing so much domestically, so much internationally that we don't even know about all the things he was trying to do unless you really, really dig closely. It's just really incredible just how active of a president he was.
It's amazing. And the thing is that the media likes to really downplay. I mean, we just had Jim D'Eugenio on, and his episode is up right now, where he talked about the book that CNN's Chris Wallace just wrote about, where he pumps up Nixon, if you could believe it, and downplays Kennedy. And it's just amazing. Like, he tried to actually say that Nixon was better on civil rights than Kennedy. Nixon's foreign policy, where he actually overseen 3 genocides, he tries to say is better than Kennedy's. I mean, it was just amazing, the spin that people put on this and try to downplay Kennedy. It's really disgusting, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I have lost all patience for people who try to shit on JFK. I just
Yeah,
have no patience left for it.
I don't either.
You know what I mean? Like, he was extremely hardworking, extremely active, extremely thoughtful. I mean, he was so committed to his job, like every aspect of his job. There's just no president since that has been remotely as committed to serving the public as he was. And I think people don't even know what he was doing and don't even know how different our world would look today, had he not been assassinated. And I think that information needs to get out there. And that's why I posted that article, even though I missed it in my book. I was like, I want this information out there. So Jim was kind enough to post it on his website.
Yeah,
So I'm glad that information is out there now.
but
Monica, what about, oh, I'm sorry, Sean.
go ahead. No, go ahead, Billy. Go ahead.
What about what were JFK's views on as far as what could be done with campaign contributions? In other words, what can the candidates spend that money on?
Yeah, so he also was interested in maybe limiting campaign expenditures, so like making campaigns cheaper. He didn't really get as much into that as into the different ways to finance them, but he was also looking, I know that's one of the things the commission studied, is how do we just reduce campaign costs? How do we make it not so insanely expensive for someone to run for president? So that is something they looked at. I don't remember what recommendations they came back to with that specifically with that, or if JFK did anything very specific with those recommendations in terms of reducing campaign costs.
Yeah, it just seems like there has to be so many millions and millions and millions of dollars being spent on these commercials. I mean, we're just literally bombarded with these commercials every 2 seconds. It's crazy.
Every second.
I'm thinking to myself, how much money is being spent on these commercials alone? I mean, that money could go to so many, better causes, and so many people, there's just so many better ways to spend that money.
Well, look,
Yeah,
Monica
no,
said
it should be free. I mean, once you
Right.
get down to the final 2 candidates, it should be free. It's kind of weird that they have to pay for it.
It's crazy,
But like you were saying with those super PACs that was created by the 71 Act, I mean, we just know from the local politicians running, and Bill, you've probably seen them, a couple of the Republican candidates, McCormick and Bresnahan, they will run ads putting down the other candidate where they're running they'll put an actor up there that looks like a middle-class guy, and he's saying that, the other candidate's not for the people and this and that. And then if you pause it at the end, you see at the bottom all the fine print that these super PACs are behind it.
Right.
You see these super PACs are like big oil and big gas and big money all behind this. And like you said, multiple super PACs are created. And this is who's funding all these ads, and we're getting bombarded with them. You can't even watch TV anymore.
Yeah, no, it's just terrible. And that's why we don't have politicians that serve the public. That's why I titled my article, how JFK tried to prevent our lesser evil elections, is we don't really have anyone to vote for. It's very hard to get somebody of the caliber of a JFK to run, because that's not who all these wealthy donors are going to support. JFK was lucky enough to have a lot of his own father's money to help him campaign and help finance his campaign. But, unless you get a really wealthy person that's willing to finance their own campaign, you're going to get someone who's subservient to powerful financial interests. And that's true for both sides. And that's why we have the country we have. That's why we have the politicians we have. And they really need to relook at what JFK was trying to do and implement better laws to have a wider array of voters, and not have these campaigns fully financed by wealthy donors.
Yeah, I agree. And it's at this point, I think, people that are out there looking for somebody like a JFK to come in and save everything is, that's a lost cause at this point, because there is nobody like JFK that's out there. But I think it's important, Monica, to do what we're doing and what you do, to just get out the message of what JFK was doing, because so many people don't really know the truth. All they know about is, Marilyn Monroe and the mafia and all this nonsense that's there specifically to muddy the waters. And that's what it's used for, to block, from getting to the truth about what JFK was really doing and what his domestic policies were, what his foreign policies were. I mean, all of that is so important, and the other stuff is just nonsense that's there to muddy the waters.
Well, Sean, I would disagree with you. I think there are people out there like JFK. I think they're just too smart to run for president. I think that
Well,
they know better.
maybe they know, where the bullet came from in '63, and they don't want to do the things
Exactly.
that you're probably right on that.
Yeah.
But Monica, is there anything
no.
you want to say to
Go
wrap
ahead.
up the article, and then we'll move on to a couple other subjects we have?
No, I think we did a good job covering it. I think, I think it's something that people should understand and should know, and it's yet another thing that we lost when JFK was killed.
Billy,
Yeah.
you want to take a break, and then we'll
Yeah,
come
why
back?
don't we take it? We'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back and hit the next subject with Monika Wiesak. That's Enough Out of You is also sponsored by Case Quattro Winery, featuring over 20 flavors of wine, from dry red, dry white, and fruit for your sampling pleasure. Case Quattro Winery offers entertainment, parties, and private events. Now serving a full menu with a little something for everyone, including appetizers, salads, dinners, pizza, and desserts. Case Quattro has some of the best live entertainment in the area, with comedy and karaoke nights and live bands. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram for all of our upcoming events. And if you mention the code OUTA, that's OUTTA, you get 15% off of your order. Located on Main Street in Peckville, Pennsylvania, call 570-382-3855 for more information. And we thank Case Quattro Winery for their support. Okay, welcome. We are back with That's Enough Out of You, and we have with us our guest, Monika Wiesak. She is the author of America's Last President, What We Lost When We Lost John F. Kennedy, and Michael Jackson. I'll get it this time, Monika. The Man, the Music, the Controversy.
Yes, that's it.
And you can, Sean, we have both of those books on our bookshop, correct?
We do, yes.
All right.
And we'll post links to that.
All right.
So let's turn our attention to what's coming up Tuesday, which is the election. By the time this episode comes out, we'll already know who's going to be the next president. But
Maybe.
Maybe, yeah, that's true, maybe. But Monica, one of the things that's really disturbing, and we talk about the lesser evil elections, which really there's nobody been like Kennedy since '63. But I think this election is different, at least for me and Billy, because we're presented with a threat. that is so dangerous, in my opinion, and that's MAGA. And the MSG rally that they had the other day, where they're making jokes about Puerto Rico, and they're making jokes about black people eating watermelons. I mean, that's who MAGA is. That's their brand, and to me, this election is the importance of this is that Trump and MAGA are a real threat right now, especially with Project 2025, which we covered in an episode, which is extremely dangerous. In my opinion, it's pure fascism. And just there seems to be like a double standard with this election. Like I see, like Harris is held to a standard, and Trump is held to no standard. Like he's basically saying whatever he wants. He says the most bizarre things. I never heard a politician say the stuff that he says, talking about Hannibal Lecter and Arnold Palmer and all this nonsense. It's almost like a comedy act. But I think this is so dangerous right now with MAGA. And I was wondering if you have the same opinion on that.
I actually do not. For starters, I can't stand Trump. I'll start with that. I don't like him. I think he was a horrible president. I think if he gets reelected, he'll be a horrible president. I don't at all think he's anti-establishment. I think the people that compare him to JFK are crazy. So I'll put that out for starters. But I also think the Democrats are very dangerous. For me, my number one issue is medical freedom. So for me, I almost lost my job because of Joe Biden's executive order. So for me, having to choose between employment and losing my sovereignty over my own body is a very big deal. And that to me is the ultimate form of fascism, right? When you say you have to take this experimental medical product or you can't be employed in our society, that was essentially Joe Biden's executive order. So that to me is equally dangerous. So I think both sides are horrible. I don't condone Trump in any way. I don't support him. I don't like him. But I also don't think Kamala is any better. That's kind of my take. So I understand where you guys are coming from. I know Trump is, he's toxic. Let's just, Trump is extremely toxic for our society. But I also think
he's created a cult, though, which is the dangerous thing, a cult. And I don't know how many MAGA people you have to deal with out in California, but me and Billy are surrounded by them. And we hear the racism every day, and we see them flying the Nazi flags and the Confederate flags, even though we live in Pennsylvania. But the danger, to me, that the danger is right in front. Like I understand the big picture situation and everything, but MAGA is such a threat that it's right there. And to me, that's a threat. That racism that this Trump is held like. How about this question? Do you agree that Trump is being held to the same standard that Harris is with the media?
I think the media trashes Trump a lot more than they trash her. So I think Trump is toxic. The media loves Trump's toxicity because the media loves to sow division, and Trump is ideal for that. So they love using him to sow division. And so even though the media trashes Trump constantly, I think they love trashing him to sow division. And everybody says the media hates Trump. I actually think they love Trump because they love the division. So, and that's why I don't view Trump as anti-establishment.
Oh, definitely not.
I agree with you. I think that, Trump
loves chaos.
He's great for ratings. He's absolutely, which is, I believe, what got him elected the first time. It was literally 24/7 Trump, 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 and it still is. And, when you put him out there that much, people are going to, they're going to respond to that. And people that don't normally follow elections and don't normally care about politicians are now interested because here's this, clown saying all these crazy, stupid things. And people are going, hey, this guy's pretty fun. I don't really care who the president is. I'm just going to vote for him because he seems like he's, he makes people laugh or whatever, or he creates controversy. And I think that's what got him elected the first time. And, as we speak, we're still allowed to have a show. We're still a democracy. We're still a couple days away from the election. So we'll see what happens. But, I think that, if that happens again, then I really believe that's what caused it. And I think you're absolutely right, Monica. The media loves to sow division. They love to say, hey, look what this guy's doing. look at, what he's telling, look at what he's saying. And people should be pissed off about it. I'm not saying that,
Yeah.
I'm not excusing his behavior or what he's saying, but the media certainly, is tripping all over themselves to make sure that exactly what he said. And I think it's, as far as, the being held to a stand, to a double standard, Sean, I think I saw a quote somewhere that said, Kamala is being forced to answer for things that Joe Biden has said. Why isn't Trump being forced to, to answer for things that he said? Like, it just doesn't, it doesn't make any sense. But again, I think that's the hypocrisy of the media.
Well, I mean, 20 years ago, if you had somebody running in politics saying the crazy stuff Trump does, I don't think he could even get elected. Just the point that this clown is even running, to me, is just a real danger. It's just an absolute danger. And this is the point we're at. And I think, Monica, does have to go to your article. Like, I think, the stuff that JFK wanted to do with campaigns and stuff would have prevented somebody like a Trump running.
Yeah, I think we would have had a completely different set of candidates. And Kamala wouldn't be running either because she wasn't elected, she was selected. So, she didn't win a single vote. So I don't think either of them would be our candidates. I think we might actually have decent candidates on both sides to pick from. If JFK's, campaign finance laws had passed, I think it would have just been completely different. We would have had candidates that we wanted, candidates that we voted for. And I think then, regardless of who got elected, I think we would have had a decent president, but we don't, instead, regardless of who gets elected, I think we have an unqualified president.
Well, the thing is, if you go back to 63 and you just go back to stuff Kennedy was doing and talk about his foreign policy for a minute, and you see the direction of everything Kennedy was doing in the Middle East, in Africa, and how everything changed after that. Lyndon Johnson basically changed everything, including Vietnam, reversed it while Kennedy's still in a casket. So everything foreign policy-wise changed the entire world by that assassination. And so, I mean, we haven't had, let's put it this way, we haven't had a president since Kennedy that ran his own foreign policy. In my opinion, it's always been run from the intelligence community and from the military, where Kennedy was running his own foreign policy.
Yeah, I think he was the last, that's why I titled my book America's Last President. He was the last truly independent, sovereign president who wasn't working on behalf of special interests. And I think ever since, not just foreign policy, but domestic policy as well, we've had decades of presidents who are subservient to special interests. They're subservient to their donors, and they tried to do that even back then. Like, I know, I did mention this in my book when Abraham Feinberg, the guy who was financing Israel's nuclear weapon, or organizing the financing for Israel's nuclear weapons program, said to JFK, I'll finance your campaign if you let me control your Middle East policy, and JFK just said he felt sick to his stomach after that. But that's how it is. Pharma will go to the Democrats and say, we'll finance your campaign if you, push these vaccines or whatever. And somebody will go to Trump and say, we'll finance your campaign if you do this or that. Trump is talking about like deporting people who criticize what Israel's doing in Gaza right now. So they're all bought. And they're largely bought by the same interests, although I think Democrats are bought by slightly different interests than Republicans. But to me, they're all bought. Both sides are bought. Both sides are owned. Both sides are horrible. Which
Well,
again
it's impossible for the common guy to run, for the common person to run for president.
It's impossible. Yeah, they don't have the money. Like, the amount of money required to run for president is just obscene. You can't run without the money. You can't run without the media support. It's impossible. You're going to get, unless the only way you're going to get someone decent in there is if you have someone really wealthy that finances their own campaign, in a way what JFK did, right? If you get anyone else who's not super wealthy running, you're going to get a bad president. You just are, and then people can argue. Yeah, I mean, people, yeah. And that's what I mean about the lesser evil elections. People can argue this side is slightly better or that side is slightly better this election cycle, but they're both horrible. They're both fascist, in my opinion. They're both horrible. They both promote censorship. They both serve industry. Um, they're just, I don't know, just I can't stand either party. That's kind of my take on it. And it's not like the people in the parties, like, you know, the Americans, not the American people, obviously, but just the leadership of those parties and where they're headed and the interests that they serve. Nobody is doing what JFK was doing. Nobody, not even close. You know, I think people try to compare like Obama or Kamala or whoever, or even Trump to JFK. And to me, there's just no comparison whatsoever. You know, those three don't even remotely compare to JFK in terms of who they're working for and the policies that they're pushing.
Yeah, I mean, there is no JFK out there. And like Bill said, you know, they're not going to run. And now you got, you know, if you have a rich person that, you know, like a Musk or Bezos, they're going to promote their guy, Trump or whoever,
Yeah.
and they're going to be in the shadows or, you know, they're not going to come out front and run. You know, they're going to, and I still think another thing, and I don't know if you agree with this, Monica, but I think Peter Thiel is a very dangerous thing in this,
Oh, yeah.
because he's behind JD Vance, and I think, you know, I think the plan is to get Vance in there and then move Trump out by Peter Thiel, and he wants to put Vance in there, and then he would have his puppet because Peter Thiel's created Vance. You know, he's when we talked about this before. So I think Peter Thiel's a real danger. But this is the problem where you have these guys in the background influencing the election, and the common person doesn't really have a say in what's going on.
Yeah, I agree. And I think ultimately they both push the same policies. And what Peter Thiel and JD Vance is a great example of that because, you know, during COVID, you had the Democrats pushing all the censorship, right? But now, like, Trump is pushing censorship over Israel. The Democrats are pushing censorship over, you know, COVID and vaccines and whatnot. So they're both pushing censorship. They're just using different issues to push the censorship agenda. And that's what I mean by I think both sides are horrible. I think they both, neither supports free speech. They both claim to support free speech, neither does. They both claim to be anti fascist, but they're both fascist, in my opinion. And so they're just, I just think they're both horrible. I think they're both horrible. And I agree with you. I think there's a lot of concern over Peter Thiel because, you know, I think he wants to promote a very technocratic kind of society, which we don't want to go down that road at all, you know? So I
And
think,
the
yeah.
dangerous thing about Peter Thiel is he's actually an intelligent person compared to Trump, who's an idiot. I mean, so he's a real threat and a real danger. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it too has to do with, you know, let's face it, a lot of these people that are inside there, they know what happened to JFK in '63. They know it wasn't Oswald, and they know that there's a line that they can't cross. And if they try to cross that line, they try to go against big industry, they try to go against the military, the intelligence community, something similar is going to happen to them. And everybody knows that. And I think there was a comment Obama had when one of his advisors asked him about when he was leaving office about all the hope and change. And he said something to the effect, well, you know what happened to Dr. King, right? So everybody kind of understands, you know, what happens to the people that are out there promoting peace and trying to be for the people, because, you know, John Kennedy, Bob Kennedy, Martin Luther King, all examples of what happens to the people that promote peace.
Yeah, no, it's very scary. And I don't know how you fix it. You have to change the laws. Um, you have to get what JFK was trying to do. You have to broaden the campaign contributions. You can't have these people running for office dependent on large donors because then you get what we got, basically. And I think until that's fixed, it's almost like the most fundamental thing. If we can't get people to run for office that are genuinely working in the public interest, you know, then we can't really rely on public office to fix our issues if we can't get the right people into there. You know what I mean? And I don't know.
Yeah.
And the thing
And
is,
Monica,
it's the Congress has to pass the laws that change how campaign contributions work. And good luck getting them to pass anything like that today.
and I think a lot of it goes back to the media too, because there are people out there who do care and who, you know, who would put the people first and put people's interest ahead of their own, ahead of their parties, ahead of, the campaign contributions. But what happens is the media brands them as radicals, right? They brand them as, communists and, people who aren't fit to run the country. And I think a lot of this stems from the media. It stems from the way that we are presented, our candidates, the way that we're presented these politicians, and the fact that people really just don't do their own research on politicians. They just rely on what they're told. They rely on, the guy who's on at 9 o'clock or the woman who's on at 9 o'clock, what their opinion is of, certain politicians or certain people who are out there. We don't go any further than that. We don't go any deeper than that. And I think we need to start doing that. We need to start looking at people and asking questions and reading and researching and things of that nature. And maybe at some point we will be able to elect the right people, despite, it would be sort of the ultimate, FU to the media if we start electing candidates that they are, telling us are radical or too, they don't fall in line with the way that, the parties are, the way that our government is set up. We need to start doing more of that, I think.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's a really, really vital point you made there, because we can increase the number of donors and get everyone to donate $10 in America. But if they're just going to donate to who the media tells them to donate to your point, that doesn't actually solve the issue at all.
Right.
So it's really, you need both. You need dispersed donors, but you also need people independently deciding who they're going to donate to, and not just donating to who the media tells them they should donate to. And I think both those problems have to be solved. And if you only solve one, then you're not really solving the problem. You have to solve both of them.
And again, the two-party system is such a big problem in this country. It has been for hundreds of years now. We've had two parties that control everything. And it's just, we really, I know, people say, well, we don't want to be socialists. We don't want to be communists. We don't want to be this. We don't want to be that. Yeah. But look what we are. Look what we're, what our choices are. And it just, we have to start coming up with alternatives. We have to start coming up with more choices, more people with differing opinions. They may not represent every single thing that you want to see, that you believe in, but if we can get people out there that offer, hey, this is something that the Republicans and the Democrats don't, they don't represent. I don't take money from outside sources. I'm not going to, I'm not going to be influenced by big pharma. I'm not going to be influenced by, by the gun industry or, the media. Like, this is just who I am. This is what I believe in. I don't know. We need, that's what we need. I truly believe that is more diversity at this point.
I think that would start at the local level. If you start at a local
Sure.
level with a politician and, if he could come up through the ranks before he would get, corrupted, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Because the other thing with this two-party system is you have my team versus your team. So it's like my team's always right no matter what they do. Your team's always wrong no matter what they do. And it just feeds to this toxicity where no one's actually listening to the issues. They're listening to what their team is telling them. And they say, whatever my team says, that's what I'm going to believe.
Right.
And so there's no independent thought anymore. Nobody's actually looking issue by issue. It shouldn't be that I always side with the Democrats or I always side with the Republicans. It should be, okay, on some issues, I agree more with the Democrats. On some issues, I agree more with the Republicans. And that's how it should be. It should be dispersed where you're independently thinking about every issue. And so if we had more independent candidates instead of just the two parties, I think that would help tremendously. It would be so much less toxic too. People wouldn't be fighting so much with each other.
Sure, because instead of two ideas, we'd maybe have 5 or 6 or 7, and we'd be able to look at different ideas that different people have and say, okay, well, maybe I'm not a Democrat. Maybe I'm a this this guy or gal represents more of what I believe in than anybody in this party that I've been voting with for the last 30, 40 years.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Monica, we're going to take a real quick break and we will come back. and get into some more talk, right, Sean? What are we going to cover?
Let's get in. We'll get into some quotes. Let's get into some famous quotes by JFK and Michael Jackson.
All right, sounds good. All right, we will be right back. DK's Corner has moved. Come see us in our brand new location at 201 Cherry Street in Jessup, Pennsylvania, right across from the Jessup Plaza. Enjoy a brand new menu with hot and cold sandwiches, soups, salads, pizza, delicious breakfast, including breakfast bowls and sandwiches, specialty coffees, and DK's famous Razzle Dazzle flavor shaken espressos, and still the best cheesesteaks around. Follow DK's Corner on Facebook and Instagram, or call them at 570-209-0278 to find out about their daily specials and catering. And DK's Corner now has beautiful outdoor seating for the summer. Don't feel like leaving the house? Call DK's Corner for delivery. And we thank DK's Corner for sponsoring That's Enough Out of You. DK's Corner, now in Jessup, Pennsylvania. And we would like to thank our sponsor, Gracious Day Grains. Sean, you like to eat healthy, don't you?
Always, buddy. I try to eat healthy as much as I can.
Yeah, and there is nothing healthier than what they call like farm to table, right? So when you can get something right from the ground and make it and then put it right on your table. And Gracious Day Grains, they have a tremendous selection, and it's totally organic. Everything is, they don't use any sort of herbicides or pesticides or anything like that. They have a bunch of different products on their website, Gracious Day Grains. So if you go to graciousdaymilling.com, you'll find a bunch of great stuff there, Sean.
Yeah, you will, Billy. And it's owned by Tom Maxey, who's a great guy from Virginia. He's a truth seeker, just like me and you, buddy. And Tom's growing philosophy follows the wisdom of farmers of centuries past. And a quote from Tom is, "If we practice the right rotations, we exclude the bugs and weeds without needing herbicides or pesticides." So, this is great, Billy. What he's doing is fantastic.
There's cornbread mix, there's cornmeal, popcorn he sells, buckwheat Sean, have you had buckwheat pancakes?
No, buddy.
Oh they're delicious. I love buckwheat pancakes. And Gracious Day Grains sells buckwheat pancakes. Just go to their website and you'll be able to find all of this stuff there. You can order it right off the website. You can find out all about how they farm and their whole philosophy, Tom's philosophy. It's great stuff.
It really is, Billy. And one of the things he does is he grinds small batches at very low temperatures, which retains the flavor and the freshness.
Of course. And it can't get any fresher than that. It's literally right from the ground. So again, go to graciousdaymilling.com and just, take a look on there. You can order whatever you want and they'll send it right to your door. Again, it doesn't get any fresher than that, right from Tom's farm to your door to your table. So
absolutely. And eat healthy and you'll feel better.
Absolutely. I wish I could do that. I wish I could eat healthier, Sean.
We'll start with Tom's stuff, buddy.
I'm going to order some of those buckwheat pancakes. I love
There you go. I'm going to try them too, Billy.
Yeah, they're really good. All right. Gracious Day. We thank Gracious Day Grains for their sponsorship.
Thank you.
We are back with more of That's Enough Out of You, and we have Monika Wiesak. All right, Sean, what are the quotes we're going to be looking at now?
Well, first thing I want to say is, people should follow Monika on Twitter because she posts a lot of these great quotes by JFK and Michael Jackson on her Twitter page. But let's start with some of these great quotes, Monika, from JFK, and we'll talk about them a little bit. Pick whatever one you want.
Do you want me to play one?
Sure.
Let me see. I'll just go to my Twitter page. So one of my favorites, and it's actually pinned on my page, is I'll just play it.
Start it over.
There have been 3 Peace Corpsmen who have died already in the service of their country and in a larger sense in the service of peace and the service of all people. And I suppose through the hazards of fate, living as these young men and women do, on the horizon of experience that others will find themselves giving up their lives. I can imagine if that must come, no cause, the cause of peace, that is more worthy of that kind of great contribution. To be able to make a maximum effort to serve peace in a time of maximum danger, I would consider the most satisfactory of human experiences. There have been 3 Peace Corpsmen who...
Wow.
Let me stop that. Yeah, so just a lot of quotes like that I've been sharing. There's a lot of things that I didn't put in my book, because there's just, I quoted him extensively in the book, but there's so much that I didn't put in there. And so there's just so many quotes. I try to post a quote of JFK every day on there, or a clip of him speaking about something or other. But that's one of my favorites, because it shows that he thought peace was worth dying for, and not only worth dying for, but that he would consider it, the most satisfactory of human experiences. And so it's chilling, but at the same time, it gives a certain degree of comfort knowing that, I don't think he would regret what he did.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, unlike a lot of presidents, he actually was a military guy who's seen combat and almost died. And he had a brother who died in combat. So I think that experience, I think and I think that's why he was such a peace president. He understood, what needed to be done to get to peace.
Yeah, I think exactly, because he had seen war with his own eyes, and he'd almost died in the war, and he was saved by indigenous islanders. It not
Yes.
only gave him a respect for peace and for the dangers of war, but also a respect for self-determination and anti-colonialism, and, wanting all these people across the globe to have their own say and their own sovereignty over their own lives. And so I just think he had such a respect for life and such a respect for peace, that he had such a unique life. I mean, he was sick a lot
Mm-hmm.
when he was young. He died, came close to dying multiple times in his life. So I just think he had such a different perspective and appreciation for life than most people do. And I think that's part of what made him such a great president. And I think that's why he was able to stand up to so many powerful interests, whereas most people would not. But I think he knew that life is short and life is limited, and that you have to do what you believe is right, no matter the consequences. And that's kind of, what he said in his book, Profiles in Courage, is, a man does what he must in spite of personal consequences, in spite of hazards and dangers and pressures. And that's the basis of all human morality. And I think he really, really genuinely believed in that. And he wasn't scared to die. And so he wasn't scared to do what he thought was right.
I'm looking at one you posted a few days ago, Monica, and I think this one probably, rings truer today than it ever did. And that is, he said, I knew this country faced serious challenges, but I could not realize, nor could any man realize, who does not bear the burdens of this office, how heavy and constant would be those burdens. I know that sometimes we get impatient, but there is no quick and easy solution.
Yeah, it's so relevant to today. I agree with you 100%. I think people want the quick and easy solution. They don't understand nuance. They don't understand complexity. And it goes back to, like, the two teams, the red team, the blue team. Everything's so simple. My team's always right. There's no complexity or nuance or appreciation of the other's perspective, or it's just, yeah, I mean, issues are complex. Issues are complex. They need discussion, they need debate. And that's how you get to, an answer and a solution that is acceptable to everyone.
Right. And all we're being fed today are quick and easy solutions. I'll make one phone call and end this war.
Yeah.
I'm going to pass this. I'm going to pass that. Well, you're not. It's not that simple. It requires a lot of cooperation. It requires working across the aisle, especially these days. And it's so hard to do because these politicians are so afraid that if they work with someone on the other side, that they're going to be voted out, they're going to be criticized, that as a traitor to their party. and it's working against the American people.
No, absolutely, absolutely. It's just, I don't know, the whole political system is just so toxic to me, that you need people who are going to work across the aisle, that are going to work with each other, that are really going to look at issues. And I know when JFK was campaigning, he wasn't really making promises. He was being honest and he was saying, I'm going to do the best I can. I can't promise you it's going to be easy, but I can promise you I'm going to do the best I can. Whereas if you look at Trump and Kamala, they're like, we're going to fix the world's problems. We're going to get rid of inflation. We're just like everything is going to be beautiful and magical. There's going to be these green pastures and beautiful skies. And I'm like,
Right.
well, how are you actually going to get there? And
Right.
it's not, you're not just going to flip a switch on the day you get inaugurated and fix all these problems, especially since Trump was already in office and Kamala is technically in office now. So you guys had your chance, both of you. Neither of you really did anything that was, you could have magically flipped that switch already. So why didn't you? That you're promising to flip when you get elected this time around.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
It's
mean, Trump promised to fix the border in his first term. That didn't happen, obviously. He promised all of this infrastructure. That didn't happen. I mean, we've done
the
more.
JFK files.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Never happened. And either it didn't happen with Biden. We're not, we're just so used to being lied to and disappointed. I think it's like, what was that quote from The Sopranos, Sean, where, if someone craps on our head, we're supposed to say thanks for the hat, right? I mean, it's to the point where we're just accepting, failure, constant failure from our leaders, and we just take that as the norm.
Yeah,
Well,
no, I agree. I think our standards have become so low, because we get bad candidates every election cycle. And so we've just come to accept that that's how it is. We get people who make promises and they don't keep them. And the Trump thing is hilarious because, he did run on releasing the JFK files. He didn't. He's claiming to now, and people actually think he's going to. And I was like,
he's
well, he
not
was in office for 4 years. He
And he
didn't.
didn't do it. He
What
didn't do
what
it.
makes you think he's going to do it this time?
He's not gonna. And at this
Yeah.
point, if there is anything in those files, they've probably been scrubbed, to be honest.
Yeah,
So,
no, I tend to agree with you on that.
yeah, but I mean, let's get another quote on JFK. Give me
Do you
another
want to
one.
pick one you like, Bill, since you have it up?
Go ahead, Billy.
Another one. Well, Sean, why don't you go ahead this time? Since
Yeah,
I
we
don't
each
have,
picked one, so-
I don't have the screen up, buddy.
Okay. All
I mean,
right.
I could, amazing, everything. I mean, there's so many to JFK. I mean,
Yeah. Well, how about, I mean, this is a great one too. He says, I don't think the federal government should interfere with the right of any individual to take any position he wants. I would not want to interfere with the right of any individual to give his own finances or support to any movement that he chooses to do so. And that's what we've been talking about today. And yeah, I mean, again, what he's saying is, absolutely the opposite of what we're hearing today, 100%.
Yeah, he really was the epitome of the American ideal. Like when I think of what America should be, I think of JFK. That's what this country should be.
Yeah.
well, when you think of his great speeches, I mean, obviously the American University speech, the speech he had on civil rights, which Martin Luther King said he hit out of the ballpark. I mean, tremendous. But one of the things is when he went up against the steel industry and he comes on the air and he actually stands up to industry and that speech was incredible, where he actually took them on and said he really called them out, which was amazing, which you've never seen since by any politician calling out industry.
Yeah, no, that was actually at a press conference, although he gave speeches kind of about that after that as well. But you
Right.
can see like he looks livid when you watch
Mhm.
that press
He was.
conference. I mean, he
Yeah.
looks livid. There's like steam rising from his head, so you can
Yeah.
see the anger in him.
I'll give you one more. And again, this is so relevant to today also. People are interested in a higher minimum wage, improving schools, medical care, fiscal responsibility. There are powerful and well-organized groups which oppose these programs, which gives an impression that there's widespread opposition, but a majority of the people support them. And that's
Yeah.
so true.
No, I agree. And that's extremely important. And that goes back to the division. I think most people agree. Most people want good health. Most people want security in old age. These are common things that every American wants. And yet there's this sense that everyone disagrees with each other. You know what I mean? Where I think most people actually more or less agree. And I
Right.
think that's what JFK is trying to get at there.
Right. I mean, we're all human beings. We all have the same basic needs, right? I mean, we have um we're looking for, we all want a secure job. We all want, a safe place to live, a safe place to raise our kids. We all want good education for our children. And, I don't, I mean, I think there are certain, like he says in this, there are certain groups that oppose that. There are groups that make it seem like, this group of people doesn't want that. So therefore you have to vote against them. And I think, even if you talk to your neighbor who's got, if you have a Harris sign, your neighbor has a Trump sign, go over and talk to them and say, hey, these are the things that I want, and I want for me, and I want for my family. Chances are they're going to say, I want the same thing. And it's
I
just
agree.
a question of who we believe is going to be able to deliver that for us.
No, I agree absolutely. I do think most Americans want the same things. They might vary slightly on the methods, but at the end of the day, I don't think the method is even that important. It's how do you achieve that goal, of good health, of security, good education. And so I think we as Americans have to realize we have the same goals. So why are we fighting so viciously with each other if we have the same goals?
Right.
What we should be doing is working together and setting higher standards for our politicians to meet those goals. Instead of feeding into this toxic environment that we feed into.
I agree to a point, but I think there's a certain segment of Americans that love chaos
Sure.
and they
This is
enjoy
true
it.
too, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
absolutely.
no, absolutely. Some people, and the media is a prime example of that. They love to feed into chaos. And I think people like drama. There's people that just like
Sure.
drama and they will be attracted to drama no matter what. And that's a sad thing, that exists
Which
because
is
people,
why you have a lot of this disinformation against Kennedy, because you put JFK, Marilyn Monroe, and the mafia in a story, it's going to sell and make millions of dollars, and then you come out with a phony diary and talk about UFOs and everything else, and then you get that whole genre. I mean, it's a huge business, and it's all
no,
garbage that's out there about it.
yeah, it's amazing the amount of garbage that's out there about JFK. But you're right. Yeah, you just you know, put these people together and it sells books. It doesn't matter
Right.
whether it has any truth or not. It sounds juicy. It sounds like nice gossip. It sounds like drama. So it'll sell. It's easy to push. That's why it's so easy to create such an inaccurate image of JFK because,
Sure.
it's the fault of the people pushing it, but it's also the fault of the people buying into it. People should be smarter and say, let me not just take this at face value. Let me not just assume it's true because someone says it's true. Let me see if there's actual evidence to support that. And I feed into that too because before I began studying JFK, I mean, I always liked him. I always had a good kind of intuitive vibe from him, but I bought into kind of the image that he was quite superficial and shallow. And I think because that's all I'd heard my whole life,
Sure.
that's kind of the impression I had. And so when I actually studied his presidency, I almost felt like a tremendous guilt because I was like, this is not the guy who I thought most of my life he was.
Not even
And
close.
yeah, and it was almost like because I had this impression that he was really shallow. That was just kind of my impression. I knew he kind of was against war and stuff like that, but I just kind of had this impression that he was this shallow guy. And once, I looked into his presidency, I realized, wow, this shallow is the absolute last word I would ever use to describe him. And so
Absolutely.
and if I bought into it and I'm pretty I guess I have a pretty good sense for propaganda and narrative, pushing certain narratives. And even I bought into that narrative most of my life, which is
Well, I
really
thought
sad, I
the
think.
mafia angle for a long time till I really looked into it, and I started listening to Jim D'Eugenio, and he talked about the FBI special agent in charge in Chicago, and he was talking about the mafia under 24-hour surveillance, and nothing came up about any deal with Joe Kennedy for the election. So, and then once you look into the actual election, people that actually studied it, there was no fix in there. There was no mafia rigging the election for Kennedy. Why would they help Kennedy? That's the funny thing about it. I mean, it makes no sense just on its face. It makes no sense. But I bought it for a long time just because everybody was saying that, and I didn't really look into it. And when I actually looked into it, it's complete nonsense. The same thing with Marilyn Monroe and these other stories, like Judy Exner told actually 4 different versions, and it changes over the years, and it's like they all contradict each other, and it's just unbelievable. And the same thing with Marilyn Monroe. The stories contradict each other. They bring in Bobby Kennedy, and it's just madness. But it's an industry. It's an industry that makes a lot of money.
Yeah, and the whole election fraud thing is ridiculous too, because even if he'd lost Illinois, he still would have won the
Yes.
election.
Yes.
The other thing is I almost feel like they're trying to flip it upside down, right? They're trying to obscure the fact that there was a coup in 1963. So they try to push the impression that no,
Mhm.
JFK committed a coup in 1960. He stole
Yes.
the election. So he's the one that committed the coup. He's not the one that was couped. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's part of the reason that whole he stole the 1960 election agenda is pushed. And the whole Marilyn Monroe and Judy Exner and all that is just pushed, to make him seem like this trashy guy that,
This
the
playboy
superficial guy who wasn't
tour.
work, who was busy chasing skirts instead of doing his job. And yeah, it's all very effective. It's very effective.
You know how bad the book was with Wallace is he actually compares the 1960 election to the January 6th insurrection, which is amazing. And then he doesn't even mention anything about 2000 with Gore and Bush, and but to compare to 1960, and the thing is, the funny thing is like you mentioned, Monica, even if he lost Illinois, he still had enough electoral votes to win the presidency. And Nixon was actually found out to be stealing votes in the southern part of the state in Illinois. So Nixon had guys like Pat Buchanan. They were doing a lot of, you know, dirty tactics, which is Nixon's entire career is what he did. And it's just amazing how they flipped that narrative, and they're still
Yeah.
pushing this agenda. They're still pushing it. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. No, it's because they don't want you to think about the fact that there was a coup in 1963. They want you to think about the fact that there was a coup in 1960 and that JFK was the instigator with the mafia. Like, yeah.
With the
So
mafia who he was going after. I mean,
yeah, it's just the whole thing
it's
is so
unbelievable.
ridiculous. It's
It
just
is.
insane. And yeah, I've really, really lost patience for like people that push those stories. And I don't know. I've lost patience for people who crap on JFK.
I
I
do too.
just,
It's
yeah.
it's mind-boggling, but there's people out there that still believe that. I mean, I just even people in the JFK community, that's what's so frustrating. Like really good researchers, they won't go down that road to really look into some of this stuff about the mob and Marilyn Monroe and Judy Exner, and they just push that agenda, and it's frustrating. It's really frustrating. Like these are good researchers. Why are you so bad on this one issue? Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and I don't even see the point of, pushing it. Like I
Yeah,
just,
it doesn't
you
have
know what
nothing
I
to
mean?
do with it.
Like whoever he slept with or didn't sleep with, how is that relevant to his presidency anyhow? You know
It's
what I
not.
mean? Like
It's not.
why is it even a topic of conversation? Like it's nobody's business. It's,
But
it's, he,
they bring in the Castro plots, and they bring in Marilyn
yeah,
Monroe running messages. I mean, it's so ridiculous. It's like a bad movie, really.
yeah. No, it is. It is. And,
Maybe
sadly, that's why I had kind of the impression of JFK as someone who was superficial, for much of my life.
well, I think a lot of people do until they actually look into it. Billy, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say maybe it's because he used, campaign money to pay off a porn star. And, oh, wait a minute, that wasn't him. Never mind. Why don't we get to let's do a Michael Jackson quote.
Okay.
I saw a real good one here on your page, Monica. And that is people don't look at themselves honestly. They don't look at themselves and point the finger at themselves. And that's is that from Man in the Mirror? Is that from a song?
From him talking about Man in the Mirror.
Oh, okay.
It's not the song directly, but he was talking about the song when
Okay.
he said that. So
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah,
indirectly.
and he's absolutely right. I think if people see shortcomings in themselves, they tend to blame others, right? They tend to, well, it was this person's fault, or it was my parents' fault, or it was, my ex or whoever, my whatever. And people tend not to accept the fact that, hey, we all have we all have shortcomings. We all have things that we need to work on. And, I think life would be a lot better if we, if we kind of all accepted those things and said, you know what, I do need to do some work. I need, whether it's through therapy or, just making myself a better person in some way. And, he saw that, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the same thing. He actually said in his Moonwalk book that Man in the Mirror was based on the philosophy of JFK, because JFK said the same thing as peace speech. He's like, if you want peace, you have to look inward, not outward. You have to look at what you're doing that's preventing peace, not just at what the other guy is doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, the one thing that Michael Jackson and JFK have in common is the way that both were character assassinated by elements in the media. I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, I still talk to people today that when I, if Michael Jackson, if the subject of Michael Jackson comes up, it's, well, I don't listen to his songs anymore because of what he did.
Yeah, that's why I wrote my book, because people still believe those things.
Sure
People
they
have
do.
never been exposed to the actual facts behind those allegations.
Yeah, because it didn't get it didn't get good ratings to exonerate him, right? Or to show the evidence that exonerated him. It was better to, to show the salacious part, where the accusations and all of that stuff. So
The problem is, though, when you hear something over and over and they just keep repeating the same stuff, it's really so hard to downplay that and tell the truth about what really happened. And we see this all the time with the stuff we do on our podcast with the JFK stuff. And I know, Monica, you probably do the same thing with Michael Jackson. Like, there's just people that they won't believe it because they've heard the exact opposite so many times over and over and over. And the gossip and the street gossip has become fact. And it's really
Yeah,
pathetic.
yeah, if you repeat a lie often enough, it becomes the truth. Repetition, people think that it's not the evidence that makes something true, it's how often they hear it that makes something true. And that's why these lies are so effective.
yeah. Yeah, and we're seeing that in our politics, also, and it's so damaging. It's so destructive. Yeah.
Well, you see that across the board, though. You even see that in sports media. I mean, the media could flip anything they want. They could present any narrative and make it look like it's the truth. I mean, it's just the power of the media. And people just believe what they see and what they hear, and they don't want to do their own research to find out, are these things really true? Like Alan Dulles said, Americans don't read, and a lot of them don't.
Right.
Yeah, no, the power of the media is scary. It's just scary. I mean, they control the minds of the masses. I think that's what Malcolm X said.
Yes. And Alan Dulles knew this, and that's why, you have operations like Operation Mockingbird, where he had assets in the media because he knew he could flip certain stories to hide a lot of the things that he was doing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's still happening today.
It sure is. So do you want to go with one more quote? Well, give us another JFK, Billy, while you're there.
Okay, here we go. So this relates to what we've been talking about, for a lot of this episode. I hope that before we get into another presidential campaign, we can work out some system by which the major burdens of presidential campaigns will be sustained by the national government, because to try to raise funds is a difficult task and leads to embarrassing situations. I think embarrassing and compromising situations, it's not just embarrassment. It's also, listen, I'm going to have, I have to, because I need to take money from these people, I'm going to have to kiss up to them. I'm going to have to, change some of my philosophies or pretend to anyway.
Yeah, and it's so amazing that he was so honest about that he said that openly, that, once you take campaign contributions, you're compromising yourself. You're putting yourself in an embarrassing situation.
Yep.
And for him to publicly say that, I think is really important.
Absolutely.
And, to just wrap this up, Monica, because this has been terrific, but, one of the things we talked a lot about the media and the disinformation they're out there, but they're not the only ones. I mean, Hollywood and academia has also played a major role in, diminishing the truth about Kennedy and in his reputation. And, Hollywood's goal would obviously be, because we talked about it sells. So that's why they would do a lot of this garbage. But academia, I mean, what do you feel about the reasoning? Do you feel just because a lot of academia is funded that's the main reason, or do you think that some of them have their own political ideologies that go against Kennedy? Or do you think that some of them, like we have Professor Paul Blowan from Canada, and some of them didn't know a lot of this information. They didn't know a lot of the stuff that, that there was more investigations than the Warren Commission, that there was stuff that came out about Kennedy's Vietnam policy. Like they didn't know the new information. So I think some of it might be that they're just not aware of it, and that's a failure.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of things. I think funding is certainly part of it. I think groupthink is another part of it. I think there is this impression by the media that JFK is this superficial guy who was only in office for a couple years. He's not really worth investigating. And the other thing is, I think the assassination is viewed as something like for nut jobs, right? Like if
Mhm.
you want to really study Kennedy and you want to study what policies changed as a result of his assassination, then that means you think there was a coup. If you think that there was massive policy changes, so why are you even studying that? Why are you getting into that? That's not real academic work. That's kook work, right?
Right.
So I think that's kind of that impression is created. And I think I am like very disappointed in academia because I not just with Kennedy, but just for a lot of reasons. I think, when you grow up, you think of academia as like truth seekers and, people who are curious, who are asking questions. And to me, if you have a assassination of a president, you should be curious as to what policies changed as a result of that assassination. But I think they just assume, no, it was Lee Harvey Oswald. There's no reason to look into what policies changed. He was only in office for 2 years, 2.5 years. He was only chasing skirts. We're not wasting time on this guy. And so
Sure.
a lot of it, I think, is just groupthink, brainwashing. Um, and it's just looked at as a kook subject, as like a subject for crazy conspiracy theorists. When in reality, I don't think there's any more monumental event in the last 60 years that has impacted our society more than his assassination. And virtually nobody understands, what was lost when he was assassinated and how many policies changed and the long-term repercussions of those change. Like the first thing we talked about was just our elected officials. Our entire set of elected officials might look different today. That's just one minor issue, and that's an issue that I even missed in my book. So if that one minor issue can have decades long repercussions, there are many other issues that have decades long repercussions as well. And to me, it's one of the most important things to be studied, yet it is the one thing that virtually nobody studies. It's really quite fascinating.
No, I think you're really you're on to the right thing there, because I mean, if you just factually look at JFK's policies and then just look at what Johnson did afterwards, you don't really have to even talk about the assassination, because you could figure it out on your own. Okay, I see what happened here because everything changed. So, I mean, you don't, the first episode we ever did on this podcast, we never even mentioned the assassination. We just did it on JFK's presidency. And we were getting comments from people that figured it out, said, "Oh, you're saying it's a coup." And I said, "We never said that, but in a sense, that's the conclusion." You can
Yeah, and that's what
on
I
your
tried
own.
to show. That's what I tried to show with my book because, and that's why I didn't go into the assassination in my book either. Is you know, an assassination is like it's a murder, but it's a political murder. So you can write about the murder, but there's also the politics of what changed, what were the policies, what were the old policies, what were the new policies, et cetera. And I wanted to show in my book that there was a tremendous, tremendous loss on that day, and that we're still living with that loss. And I think until people understand what a tremendous loss that assassination created and how constant it is, how we live with it every day, I don't think there will ever be a truth and reconciliation because people have to feel the pain of that loss and they don't understand the pain of that loss. They need to understand that first before they'll demand justice for that loss.
Absolutely.
Well said. Well said.
Billy, you got anything else?
No, I think we're good. Yeah, Monica, thank you so much for coming back. This has been really good discussion. We really appreciate it. Okay, Monica Wiesak, America's Last President: What the World Lost When It Lost John F. Kennedy, and also Michael Jackson, The Man, the Music, the Controversy. You can find those books on our bookshop, so make sure you go and use our bookshop in order to buy Monica's books. And Monica, we thank you so much for coming on.
Check out Monica's Twitter page too. Fantastic quotes.
Thank you. And thank you for having me back on. It's always really fun to chat with you guys. And it was great to see you on video this time.
Yeah, finally. We're
Yeah,
finally in the
definitely.
technology age.
Well, we're getting there.
Well, we're getting there.
All right, Monica, thank you so much.
Thank you,
And
Monica.
that's enough
Thank
out of
you.
you.
All right.
Thanks.
All right. That's Enough Out of You podcast is executive produced and written by Bill Rader and Sean Kane and edited by Bill Rader. The That's Enough Out of You podcast and logo are exclusive property of Bags of Chicken, LLC. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or accounts of this podcast without the express written consent of Bags of Chicken, LLC is prohibited. So don't even try it.